Well, good evening. This is Joe Allgood with Alaska's News Source. It is Thursday, September 11th. It's around 7:40 in the evening. Earlier this afternoon, I spoke with an expert criminologist. His name is Dr. Alex Del Carmen. He is a professor with Tarleton State University, as well as an expert in criminology with 28 years of experience working with police and law enforcement agencies across the country, across all different levels. We spoke in depth about the current manhunt for the gunman who shot Charlie Kirk yesterday and killed him, and what it is that investigators are looking for in that manhunt, and what it is that might happen in the coming days. Here's a look at that extended interview. To begin with, I just want to get your take on this manhunt. Obviously, it's a large task, and the current state of things right now, there's an identified person of interest, but they are still searching for him. Can you tell me where an agency, whether it's a federal or a local police agency, where do they begin with a manhunt of this nature?
Well, for starters, this is definitely what we call a high priority case, right? Given the nature of the case, the individual involved in the incident, the victim, and the fact that it has received international attention, I would bet to say that law enforcement at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level, is all coordinating and cooperating with each other in order to be able to identify the suspect. But where it begins is where it ended, right? So when you look at it from a standpoint of investigations, they're going to have to walk through that crime scene, talk to witnesses, look at where, from what I understand, they found the rifle that they believe is associated with the incident, see about some DNA traces, be able to do facial recognition with who they believe is a person of interest. And so all of this is moving at lightning speed. And it's happening, it's developing every other second with a new line to the story.
Yes, yeah, it's certainly lightning speed, as you said. Right now, there's some things that police already know. I want to get your take and just ask you what stands out about what we know now. What stands out to you in this investigation?
Well, the fact that, the security, first of all, at the college was not impressive at all. And as a college professor, I can tell you that oftentimes colleges and universities, their security is pretty relaxed when it comes to non-political individuals that are visiting their campus. In this case, you had Charlie Kirk, who is in fact has a national presence and a national audience, but not necessarily a politician that would bring his own security protocol. And so by virtue of that, the security part is obviously something that we need to talk about for future events across the universities and colleges in the U.S. But what also stands out about the case is the fact that you have now, in a matter of 24 hours since the incident or less, what we believe to be a person of interest that will make it easier for the public to cooperate and be able to offer tips to the FBI.
Gotcha. Yeah, I want to just talk a bit more about the security and this event's nature. It's a large crowd on a college campus. When there is a crowd like this, what is it that police, if there are any, are looking for in that crowd that might stick out?
Well, most of the security, from what you can see in the video that Charlie had, was basically looking at crowd control, right? So you're looking at, he had some officers, police officers behind him. They were also part of his own detail that were, you could see that they were looking at the crowd. I think the concern was that somebody from the crowd would throw something at him or would point a gun at him. And that's really what you're looking for in terms of the immediate security protocol. As best as I know, they didn't have any metal detectors. They didn't have any drones up in the air. No one had actually done a sweep or any of the buildings close by. And so, the security that Charlie had was in the immediate area only. So clearly this opened him up to being a victim of a sniper, which is in fact what sadly happened yesterday.
Yes, yeah, that sniper was about, I believe, 200 yards away on a rooftop. So in this case, is it your take that they probably weren't looking in that area up on rooftops that far away?
Probably not, because my guess is they would have identified him, right? But I will say that it's a pretty
Okay.
difficult shot to make,
Is it
right?
just
Anybody that's ever
that
had a
script already in
rifle,
the whole script? Is that
pointed at,
good with you?
when they go hunting, or especially in the great state of
Yeah.
Alaska, where you guys are familiar with that hobby. One of the things that I'll tell you is that this is a very difficult shot to make, in the sense that you have not only the distance,
Yeah, it's
but
playing
also the
out,
wind,
and
the
once
weather.
that is
All of
done,
these are
but right
factors that
now,
will
I guess
affect the
the
speed
article's not
and
posted
the
yet,
accuracy of that
but I
bullet.
put this link
And then to top it
like live
over,
stream
you got a tent,
as the
right?
featured media.
Charlie had a tent over him, so
Once
I don't
it's
know
over
what
though, I'm going
angle
to switch it
the
over
shooter
to
was able to
just a
see through that
pre-recorded
tent in order to be
video,
able to
the
get him on
interview.
the neck, which is what ended up
Um,
happening. But I'm fairly certain that this
and
person,
yeah, I
the
guess
suspect, is someone that is
I'll
incredibly
I'll
familiar
have to double
with
check the
shooting, that
script,
this
but
has been practiced on
I think at
before,
the end it
and
points
that this
back to the
person had the
website.
intent and the preparation to kill Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, that is a long shot to make. Not the longest, but certainly one that takes some experience. As you say, so many people would know from their own experience. I want to ask about the early stages. Yesterday, there were several people that were detained, suspected. It was a bit unclear if they had a person in custody for a while. Why is it that in a manhunt like this, the early stages, that might happen?
Everything is incredibly fast moving, right? These cases move at lightning speed, especially early on, right after the incident. And part of the reason why is because, as you noted, the crime scene in this case was outdoors. And so, the elements are typically compete against that idea of preserving the crime scene as best as you can. There are also, hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, passing through there, that they wanted to leave the area as quickly as they could, and for right and justifiable reasons. But the crime scene is tempered. And in addition to that, you also have the element of being able to secure every single shell, every single piece of evidence that you can, interview witnesses, any kind of camera footage to review it. So this is moving very quickly, and as such, I'm sure that there were some early findings, or at least they thought findings, related to various suspects that they thought were behind the rifle that shot and killed Charlie Kirk. And so that's what happened in these two, what appears to be two detained individuals that were then released after they were cleared. It's not unusual to see that in a case like this.
Yeah, I'm sure they were casting a wide net in such a large crowd. There's so much that you could be watching and looking at. What are the challenges of that? And you already mentioned a few of them, the time, moving things quickly, the elements, all that. What are some of the challenges of now searching for a person of interest that they know is out there, and they know they have a description, but they're still looking for him? What are the challenges?
Well, the more time that passes, the more difficult that it is to identify the suspect, right? Now, you got to remember that there's a science to this, and that we've studied it for years, in the sense that, the more time you give a suspect to flee the scene, the more likely that person, especially if this is something that they already planned their escape route, they could be by plane, by car, on foot. It could also be, he could be in a local area. He could be thousands of miles away from the crime scene, for all we know. These individuals that are highly trained, they know to change their appearance almost right away. Taint and color their hair, change their, grow facial hair in his case, do whatever it takes till he doesn't look like the picture that's being circulated around the internet. So, time is an enemy to the investigators, and they know they have to move very aggressively and very quickly on any leads that they have at this point.
Yeah, that's certainly the big challenge is timing, and the more time he has, the more challenging it gets. I want to ask about right now, as investigators are looking, what is it that they're looking for? What are you starting with doing right now? Places they're looking, people they're looking for, what does that look like?
Yeah, well, it depends if they have the name of the person, right? Assuming that they already have a picture, that's pretty clear. They put it out there as a person of interest. My guess is that they have a person's name. They know where this person lived. They have a DNA of this person. They have family members that know this individual. They may also be able to link this person up to some internet postings, locations where, if he had a cell phone on, where did the tower ping him last? So they're going through a very methodical process to be able to identify this individual as quickly as they can. And so I assume, and I recognize, with the level of importance that this case has been given in the past few hours, that it is very likely that the FBI is going to be zeroing in on a suspect very, very soon.
Yeah. If they don't have that suspect, maybe later tonight or even tomorrow morning, how does that change the investigation? What does that look like at that point?
Again, time is of the essence, right? If they don't have a suspect, in another day or so, it's going to be that much harder to be able to catch this person, especially if, some people are saying that there was a plane that took off close by and that it wasn't being monitored, that it disappeared from radar. If any of those theories or hypotheses are true, we can assume that this individual is thousands of miles away from the crime scene, and that every day that passes, he is getting further and further away from law enforcement, or perhaps from even from the United States.
Yeah, I want to ask your take on those theories. As an investigator, how much credence do you give to the theory that maybe he's already fled the country?
Well, we listen to everything, right? So in the law enforcement community, we don't shut any theories out, and we certainly are open to any tips that people give us. But the idea is to process them as quickly as you can and discard them as appropriate. But I can tell you that over the years, having worked with law enforcement for, in my case, 28 years, there are very few things that we eliminate from the spectrum of possibilities, and especially early on in the case, such as this case right now. So they are likely going to be listening to lots of different versions of what people think happened. They're going to be looking at various theories. They're going to be looking at hypotheses. They're going to be looking at, what trains, what buses, what airplanes were close by to the area. Did this person have any links to any of these entities? Did this person drive to the scene? Did the person walk to the scene? Did he have help? Is there an ideological component to this? Are there people that are aiding this person from abroad, from overseas? Remember that our enemies oftentimes gain from our division internally. So all sorts of assumptions have to be made until they're ruled out.
Yeah, it's certainly anything's on the table, or a lot of things are on the table. I want to ask about the physical evidence. They have a bolt-action rifle and they have some ammunition, as well as some other things. I believe they went and investigated a residence. What is the significance of that physical evidence, and how does it help in this manhunt?
DNA, right? So once you have a rifle, you can assume that there are hair samples, or the individual touched it with his hands in this case, where you would have traces of DNA. You would also have, if you have shells, you would know where they're purchased. You would know where the rifle was purchased, or how it was obtained, or who gave the rifle to this individual. And that takes you closer to the person, right? For those of us in the business of criminology, when we try to put a typology together as to the makeup of this person, these are all helpful components, because then we get to find out what kind of childhood this person had, what sort of manifestos, if any, this person has publicized online. And we start sort of piecing together what this person's mindset was, what the intent was, what his limitations are, what his economic ability to move around the country or outside the country are, and what credit cards he may have that he's still using, and so what family members he may resort to for help. So this opens up all sorts of possibilities. Once in an investigation that a rifle has been found and that shell casings have been found, that you're getting closer to the suspect by virtue of the presence of those elements.
Wow, I hadn't even thought about things as far back as his childhood and all that you can extrapolate from a rifle. That's why you're the expert, not me. I want to ask about the eventual possibility, if they catch this guy, what happens then? What do investigators and authorities do?
It depends on how they catch him, right? If they are able to apprehend him in a peaceful manner and bring him up before a judge, I mean, the investigators are going to want to know why, how long did you plan this for? Are there other people involved in the planning? Is this a matter of you having differences of ideological beliefs with Charlie? Are you being paid by a foreign entity? Do you have ties to other countries? Do you speak other languages? Have you served in the military? What sort of background do you bring to this? And what were your motives? And oftentimes we find out why, right? Oftentimes we find out because the suspect, once they know that we pretty much have every piece of physical evidence that's going to convict the person. At some point, they begin to talk and tell us, what was in their heart and why they did what they did, and justify it in their own mind. Although, in my view, no act of violence could ever be justified, right? But having said that, we can piece it together. But there are some cases where the individual goes to prison, and in some cases may even be put to death, and we never know the real reasons as to why this person had a motive to kill an innocent person.
Yeah, as you said, violence is never justified. I'm wondering if the investigators, do you believe they're considering this individual potentially dangerous, armed and dangerous?
Absolutely. I mean, if this person was able to get on a rooftop and shoot from 200 meters, a person that is well known to the community and to the nation and perhaps even to the world, this person can only be assumed to be armed, to be experienced, to be dangerous, and to not necessarily want to go to prison.
That being said, if the authorities encounter him out somewhere in the country, would they use deadly force, and what is the sort of considerations that they're going through as they encounter him potentially in a public space?
They will use deadly force if necessary, right? Typically, deadly force is used by police officers if there is a threat to them or a threat to other individuals that are innocent bystanders in the area. And so in this particular case, if this person poses a threat of any sort, I promise you that, use of force will be used, particularly lethal force.
That being said, would it be potentially something they try to avoid just in the hopes that they can learn more from this individual?
The curiosity of a criminologist is not necessarily the urgency of a law enforcement officer, right? So I can tell you that we criminologists are always curious to learn as to why people do what they do, so that we can hopefully try to prevent those crimes, or at the very least help law enforcement in the future. But to that law enforcement officer responding to a 911 call that would have identified the person, or perhaps to have stopped this guy in the middle of the road and getting a positive identification as to who they just stopped, I promise you that police officer is not going to necessarily care whether or not, this person is able to tell us the full story or not. They're going to care about the safety of his or her colleagues, as they should, and then also the safety of innocent bystanders.
I want to ask you, in the broader, wider picture, this act, this killing, I don't know if there's been a manhunt of this size that I can recall in the recent past. Maybe the one that comes to mind is the 2013 Boston bombing manhunt. I wanted to get your take on it. Do you think there's been anything in the recent years that matches this size?
I mean, you can look at the anniversary of 9/11, right? Today, and go back to 9/11, which is, we had a pretty significant manhunt for the individuals that were responsible for the killing of innocent people, right, in various parts of the United States. And, that manhunt was not necessarily limited to the U.S. We went overseas to find the people that organized it, planned it, and not until Osama bin Laden was taken out did we really feel that we had actually sought, justice in this particular case. And so, but, to your point, or to your question, when you look at the Boston Marathon bombings, and you look at the effort that it took for the Boston Police Department and the FBI to go after, an ATF to go after the suspect, you can equate it with that particular incident, although clearly in that incident it was limited to the city of Boston and its surrounding areas, right? And if you're from New England, you know that that area is rather small in terms of size, and so it was more about containment and identification. Right now, the entire country, perhaps even other countries, are part of that fugitive task force that is looking for this particular person. So I would say that in terms of scope, length, this is going to be much, much bigger than that.
That's interesting. A sort of similar situation, but of course that also brings to mind the attempted assassination of President Trump last year, and this one, similar case. The shooter was on a rooftop, and of course the different outcome. How does this stand out from that one to this one? I want to get your take on that, and what makes these two different.
Secret Service versus, having, the Secret Service is obviously an incredibly competent entity that, oftentimes presidential detail are the ones that are closest to the president, and their job daily is to protect the President of the United States, the Vice President, and various other individuals in office. But, in this particular case, you had, local cops that were working with college police officers, trying to make sure that they did more than anything crowd control. It's a very different type of scenario.
And then looking even broader, this is obviously watched across the country and has an impact on a lot of people. How does it impact these sorts of events, and also from a policing standpoint, what will this mean for the future of policing large events, and especially when there's an individual who's maybe more high profile? What does this mean for these events going forward?
I mean, I think college campuses are going to be taking a second look, right, at how they protect their guests. Perhaps even those that are, or particularly those that are not political, elements, or have political affiliations, right? When you bring a guest speaker to a class, or somebody that has inspired some individuals to hate the rhetoric or the ideology that person may represent, they're going to have to be very careful, because they're going to have to make sure they follow a different and more strict security protocol, because no college campus wants to be a crime scene. I promise you that.
I appreciate you taking the time, Dr. Del Carmen. I learned a lot myself, and I hope others do as well. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. I would encourage you to keep up with us, watch the late edition as we continue to watch the updates on this manhunt, and any updates in the story. We'll keep you posted. Thank you so much, and have a good one.